Hey, everybody. So, I guess if you didn't hear, Whoopi Goldberg kind of stuck her foot in her mouth. So, she has been suspended from ABC for 2 weeks because when they were discussing a subject on The View, she was making a statement that the Holocaust was not about race. Now, she wasn't saying anything, it was not a Holocaust denial thing, it was nothing like that. It was, there was a book that was being pulled out of the school system. She was talking about the book, which was about the Holocaust. And then somewhere along the line, she made the mention that, well, the Holocaust was not about race. And everyone at the table was like, huh? And she's like, no, it was about, the evil of man against another man, because she stated that Jewish people were white people and it was white people against white people. Therefore, it was not about race. Okay. I understand what she thought she meant. However, if you know anything at all about the Holocaust, one of the big things that they used to love to say, the Nazis used to love to say, was that they were the master race. And then they would point to the Jews and say they were an inferior race. They did the same thing with gypsies, properly known as Roma or Romani people, depending on where what country they were coming from. Their origin is Punjab, India. So all Roma people come from there. And much like Jewish people, these were nomadic tribes that Hitler had a bit of a problem with and wanted to wipe off the face of the earth. So he referred to them as inferior races. So whether or not white Jews are considered a race or not isn't really the question. The fact that, as far as Hitler was concerned, anyone else is a race that is inferior to his. And that's what mattered, in a sense, first, that this is his belief. It's about his master race. So that means it is about race. Now, when it comes to the subject of, are Jewish people considered white, or are they a race unto themselves? Well, as all communities are, there is a division on the subject. I have talked to many Jewish people that say that is not the case, and I've talked to many Jewish people that have made the argument that, yes, in fact, it's not about skin color. Race is not always about skin color. Sometimes it's about genetic details, features, whatnot. So if you're Jewish, you sometimes have to look for, I think it's called Tay-Sachs. My grandmother's grandparents escaped from Germany during a different era where something was going on in Germany, where Jews were escaping to Brazil. We did not know about this heritage until a bunch of years ago, and when we found out, one of my doctors said, well, you may want to just get tested for Tay-Sachs. Usually the more people mix with others, then these genetics disorders sort of get watered down and you're less likely to inherit it. There was a formula. So I did get tested and I wasn't carrying the gene, but definitely on my 23andMe, yes. So that's the thing is, okay, it is about race. It just is. And, just to deny that and say it's not about race is not fair, because if a group of people that are very proud of who they are and have been persecuted for a very long time, just for eons, to say it's not about that when that was the targeted language, it is discounting something about the experience. I understand that this was not deliberate on her part. I get it. She said she misspoke. I think it's, in one way, is it you're looking at two groups of people and you're coming to a conclusion, and you're not thinking about other things that you've read and you've heard and you've discussed. I don't know why. I don't know what went wrong there. Um, but no, it's most definitely about race. Because to go into the Holocaust a little bit further, um, the Nazis were going so far as to go into Poland, for example, and they would kidnap children that could pass for the master race. And they even had, I remember when I was younger seeing films where they had these eye charts. It was a little card with different eye colors on it. And when they were kidnapping children, they would hold up the card and just see, okay, is it the right eye color? There were all these specs for which determines if this kid can pass for one of us. And then we're going to kidnap this child and we're going to raise them so that they can help us fight all these inferior races and annihilate them and get rid of them. Now, was this only about Jewish people and only about Roma people? Nope, it spread further than that. In fact, the guinea pigs of the test project for euthanasia were people with disabilities. And had I been there at that time, it would have been, no, it would not have been a good situation, because people like me that are physically challenged, people who had learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, mental illnesses, um, that whole group uh, were the first peoples that they started with sterilizing them, because it was like, okay, yeah, this is not good. Let's make sure they don't reproduce. So they started sterilizing people. Then it escalated to the next thing, which was, okay, let's put them out of their misery. And I remember being about 10 years old, and this is when I ended up in the wheelchair. I was 7 when the disease hit me, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, also known as Still's disease, and it went to work on being very destructive in my system, because basically the disease is my immune system attacking me and trying to break everything down. It's a very determined little illness. And so eventually it put me in a wheelchair, and that happened at around age 10. And this one day I was watching TV and flipping channels, and there was some documentary on Hitler. I had no idea at that point who he was. Um, and it was him giving a speech justifying why people with disabilities, including children, had to be euthanized. Now, you can imagine how that might have felt, especially as I'm brand new to being disabled. And the argument he had was that, they're just existing, they're suffering. It's unfair to them to make them just have this existence of misery. And they had all these propaganda films where they would show people like, like the one shot where someone is like the bad angle, the bad moment. And said, look at these poor people. And so it's a kindness that we should do to put them out of their misery. And then on top of it, it's so difficult on the family. And then on top of that, it's a financial drain on the family, and it's a financial drain on the country. And so the greater good is served by, well, we should put them out of their misery. And so they went to town on trying to find different ways to murder them, including they developed the gas chambers that way. And they told the patients, oh, you're just going to go to a shower. And at first, it was a little suspect. So they installed fake shower heads, and the gas would come in through the shower heads to make it look more like a giant shower room. And then they even trained the guards that they needed to turn the knobs quieter, because caused the patients to be upset, and they wanted to just sort of get everybody in there and then close the door and then turn everything on as quietly as possible. So then before they knew it was happening. And the country at first was in support of this whole thing. It's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Sure, let's do it. Then, of course, the country, a part of the country was like, maybe no. We actually kind of liked some of these kids, and they seemed really nice. And most people put their family into the institution. They didn't really see them, so they didn't know. But for the ones that they were in contact with, it just started to beg a question: should we really be killing people? And so that was stopped. So then the next way they went to it was, they said, okay, let's go to the hospitals, basically, where the children with disabilities lived. And they came up with a little bit more of deceptive way of doing it. And the nurses would slowly drug them and poison them and starve them and things like that. So here they are, knowing these children, cuddling them, playing with them. And in their mind, they had lied to themselves and said, okay, and I'm sure there were some that just were evil and absolutely loved doing this. I'm doing this to save this child. And the deaths were torturous. And so this is how they went about starting this whole euthanasia program, the whole extermination program. And then once they realized the test pilot for the gas chambers were working, that's when it went to the next level. And they not only brought Jewish people and Roma people there, but there were also gay people, trans people. There were there were African Americans there, people from Africa there. There were also people from the Soviet Union that they were exterminating. There were also let me look up so I could, because there were 6 million Jewish people, but there were millions more non-Jewish Polish civilians, Soviet prisoners of war, Soviet civilians, around 7 million, Serb civilians on the territory of Croatia and Bosnia, and I'm going to butcher this, Herzegovina. People with disabilities up to 250,000, Jehovah's Witnesses, repeat criminal offenders, and so-called asocials, German political opponents, and resistance activists in the Axis-occupied territory. So you could be part of the master race, and if you were going to oppose the master race, turn on the master race, you were going to go and meet the same fate. If you chose not to participate, but you were still supportive, like, I don't want to do the killing, but you do, do this for us. We're all in it together, and I'll clap, then you were considered a supporter. But if you were like, no, I'm going to help people escape, I'm going to betray you, then that's it. You were possibly dead. So all of this was, yes, race was a big focus in this. Now, were homosexuals considered a race? I don't know what Hitler decided in his mind a race meant, but homosexuals are not a race of people. So was it only about race? No. But it most definitely was about race. And even if part of their targeting was towards people that were not specifically a race, they were a group of people, there was a community there, but that community was not a race of people, Hitler still looked at it that he and the people that he felt were the master race didn't want to get soiled by any of these other people, including master race people that didn't come out so good, being physically disabled, mentally challenged, blah, blah, blah. And so they got to go too, because we don't need to make any more of those. God forbid we should have more disabled children. So, yes, it upsets me. I might joke a little bit about it, and by joke, how you hear me saying stuff, because it's it is that painful of a thought that, wow, if I was there at that time, it there's nothing about me as a person that would have saved me at all. You know, I couldn't go, oh, I'm just going to pass as an able-bodied walking person. Like, it's just like, no, there's nothing. You're done. And part of why he came up with the reasoning of why we have to put them out of their misery is based on a lot of those ugly laws and those philosophies that were worldwide. And the ugly laws here in America were a set of laws that if you were disabled, you were disfigured, anything where you were considered ugly to society, you were not legally allowed to be on the street. You were not allowed to be in a restaurant, a store. You were not allowed to be hired in a job. Nothing. And someone could call the cops on you for just being outside. Like, if you ever see a really old time movie and you see the police officer coming along and threatening to arrest a homeless person for just sitting outside and doing nothing wrong. That's where those laws were. And I've told this story before. These laws in America were abolished in 1974, but that thinking didn't go away overnight. And I was going to a card store to pick up a card, and I was with a friend of mine, and this very, very old man who owned the store saw me and was like, get her out of here. She's probably going to knock stuff over. She's going to be really bad for business. Nobody wants to see her in here. Get her out. And I was like, whoa, I'm just going to be real quick. Get out or I'll call the police. And I'm like, what? And I was only like 14, 15 years old. And it was a shock. And I thought, well, I'll just go buy a card elsewhere. I don't want to. No, it wasn't worth fighting for if I was going to get arrested. And the thing is, I didn't even understand at that time what the deal was. Now, had he tried to get me arrested, the law was no longer enforced. I guess he didn't realize that. I don't know. If I had known that at the time, maybe I would have stood my ground and I would have been like, no, I'm buying a card. But that's the way it was. So these were not unusual philosophies and laws that were worldwide in varying different kinds. And so that philosophy is part of what Hitler borrowed off of to say to the German people, so this is why we have to put them out of their misery, because they're a burden to society. And all of it is based on a burden to society. And it's unfair to them. He also tried to make it about a kindness, but it's ultimately about this burden to society and how unfair it is on an emotional level, on a physical level, on a financial level. So, yes, the whole Holocaust, sure, more than about race, but definitely about race. At the end of the day, it starts with he felt he was the superior race and everyone else had to go. So by that alone, it's about race. So should Whoopi be suspended? You know, it's difficult. I'm always back and forth on some of how cancel culture is handled. I always feel like it should be more of a consequence culture and people should grow and learn. There's some people that need to be canceled, though, I will say. Some people they just don't. She was on the show. She did give an apology, which starts off feeling very sincere and then starts to get very rushed at the end and comes across insincere. And I don't know if it was that she was just like, okay, I'm just going to say what I need to say. Or was it, there's but only so much time to say what you're supposed to say because we have to get on to other things with this show. And behind the camera, there is someone there going, okay, hurry it up, move on to, they're in her ear, they're telling her stuff. So that could have been why it came across that way. There's a high possibility it did, because it's only towards the very end that all of a sudden and they're off. She's trying to just get it done, and it sounds very sincere. Now, does the audience understand all of this? No. Was she sincere? I don't know. I'm not her. I do believe, since I have heard her a billion times talk about her support for the Jewish people and the different things in history that have happened. So I'm not sure what went down, what got disconnected. But maybe she needs a moment to think, because she's great. I love her. I don't agree with everything she says. I don't agree with anything, everything anybody says. But one of the things when you are the moderator of a show is you are determining the path that everything is taking. You shouldn't necessarily. You're supposed to just sort of keep things in check and go, here's what we're talking about. She's gotten a little bit more directional with the whole thing. And if you have misinformation and you're going to go correct people at the end of that segment and go, no, it was not about race. And everyone else at the table is like, no, but it was, and she's trying to have that final word, which is something that she typically tries to close it out with some kind of final statement, which a final statement is all well and good. But if the whole purpose of the show is to hear all these opinions, that final statement that comes across sometimes, many times, as a final judge and jury statement, I don't know. But I think they've got Whoopi Goldberg. She signed a contract. She wants to do things the way she wants to do them. And maybe she's gotten a little bit too caught up in how she's approaching it and what happens when she's wrong about something, and especially a subject that feels so devastating to so many people, and also can really reinforce the belief that others have that are counterproductive to the whole thing, like, Holocaust deniers or people that are anti-Semitic. A statement like that does not help. So if you have a person in a position of power, such as a moderator, you want them to say the right stuff as much as possible. And something like this can cause a problem for the network, for the viewers. And so maybe that 2 weeks off is a good time to just stop, take a moment, focus on what went wrong and why, and maybe a little re-education, and then come back with a new view on things. Because right now I think it was too soon to come back without some kind of consequence, because yes, it's just words, but words hold power. Look at what Hitler was able to accomplish with words. I mean, Hitler wasn't the one going out and physically doing any of those actions. It was the power of his words that caused all of that to happen. So if someone is the moderator of a show and wants to have the last word and says the wrong thing, on a big time subject like that, a little re-education is a good thing. And maybe there'll be a difference in how this is approached when it comes to consequences for people, that can set a different tone, so that we're not just erasing everybody that says something that's wrong. Because sometimes when people are punished and dismissed, they don't learn, and they just feel that they're right, and they don't want to learn anything, and then they keep spreading the wrong information, and then you develop this big resentful group of people, versus hold people accountable and go, okay, you need to learn. And also, since you're in the public, we should all see you learn, which will help others to learn. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But like I said, there are those that need to be canceled for sure. So let's see what's going to happen with this. Hopefully something good comes out of it, but I do feel maybe she needed to not be in the position of a moderator for the next 2 weeks. I do think it's not a bad idea. Like I said, I do like her. I like a lot of things she says. I don't agree with a ton of stuff she says, but I do think she needs a moment to think about this before saying anything else about anything else, and especially how she should come back about this issue, because I don't think today's apology satisfied anybody. It was a let's do this and get it out of the way, which that's the network. But really, maybe the show should have been dedicated to the education of what was the Holocaust? What was it about? So I also feel that ABC, you know, maybe they should have taken some responsibility for the people they hire and the voices that they want to speak on their behalf about the subjects they want, people to learn about. Well, maybe they should think about that's another way to do justice by this whole thing. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. Have a good night.